We're now moving on to a fantastic presentation, Beyond Human in the Loop, a governance model for decision distribution in AI-enabled operations, from Shane McArdle, CEO of Falkor. Round of applause, please. Thank you.
Yeah, I promised a brand overload today. Okay, if we take up the first slide. We're going to play, I think, a small video, short video is coming in. Yes. Yes.
Heavy asset industries face some of the hardest problems there are. In critical infrastructure, the stakes are absolute. These industries need more than tools. They need partners. Process engineers, asset managers, operators on the ground. We have spent years listening to them, learning what slows them down, understanding what they need to plan, execute, and operate their assets. We build technology that understands data, technology that listens, that responds. But that is only the beginning. At Falkor, we run simulations that teach AI how reality works, how forces interact, how materials function, how systems behave. An understanding of the physical world, connected to decades of operational knowledge, orchestrated by agentic AI. This is industrial intelligence. Compressing years of learning into moments of insight, expanding human capabilities to master growing complexity. The future can't be predicted with certainty, but it can be created.
That was an awkward amount of time to stand there in front of you while we watch the video. No, so on that front, there's a couple of things I want you to pull up from that, just words that you might have skipped over, but human, domain, understanding of reality and behavior, right? And they are of our assets and of our industry. So I think we're going to bookend quite well with Menno's opening, the panel that we just had, and what we are going to be presenting now. So the future hasn't arrived, of course it hasn't, but are we building correctly for the future? And I want to start with a short story about Nguyen Xuan Ly. I think I'm saying this correct. It was the first Prime Minister of Singapore after they got their independence in 1965. And why am I talking about this? Is because he built for a future that hadn't yet arrived, and he was criticized dramatically for it. And when he took over as Prime Minister, there was an existential, I would say, vulnerability he identified very quickly. That all of the fresh water supply for Singapore came through a single pipe from Malaysia. And he said that this cannot stand. So he started to make a massive investment into water desalination, water recycling, reservoirs, and he built it for a size of a country that wasn't there. And it was a massive cost, a lot of criticism. Fast forward to 2000, this gentleman had passed away, and they had reached what they called a water stress level in that region that had never been seen before. Everybody around Singapore was under severe crisis, except for them, because of the infrastructure and the vision that Nguyen Xuan Ly had back in 1965. This is a very similar setup that we're facing right now with AI. Are we first of all, have we the right vision? Do we understand what we want to change for? And are we putting the right infrastructure in play now? I'm very conscious about the cost that AI, because I think I've spent all my budget that I allocated for AI already by May. And I'm trying to make an assessment. What's the return of investment of that for me as a software company? Have we spent that money wisely? No. I've had people making cat videos using tokens inside the company, and I'm going, okay, no, we have to get control of this, you know? So we need to make sure that we have some sort of governance around the use of this inside an organization. I'm finding more budget because I do think the outcome is going to be very, very valuable, but we need to have some sort of control of it as well. This is happening, right? And the play out of AI from a productivity point of view, I really like Jack Clark in Anthropic. They're not only a software lab or a lab for AI, They're also one of the best market analysts companies out there. Now, are they building these analysis very skewed towards them as a company? Yes, but there's some very interesting data-driven information inside there as well, where they're focusing on how has AI impacted productivity across certain metrics like GDP of countries, reduction of costs, etc., increase of revenue for certain companies, and so on and so forth. And there are glimmers of productivity increases. And there are glimmers of a slowdown in hiring for junior roles, that's for sure. And you can attribute that to AI, very much. We've seen those industries where there's an absolute clear lift in productivity have been the ones with very repeatable patterns, large, clean data sets, and very good standards. Think accounting. Very standardized industry, large data sets, very repeatable. Now, you try to map that onto an industry like ourselves, it's chaos. And you don't put intelligence on top of chaos. So you would almost think that myself and Menno have coordinated on this, but it's back to having that foundations, the foundation for us to be able to, first of all, move from human in the loop, which I fully support is required right now. We have to have that. But where are we going in the future? And that's human on the loop. How do we get there? There's a couple of prerequisites that we need to have in place, and there were some good discussions here as well from the panel. So how do we get there? What's the fundamental elements that we need? First, we need a good platform to handle our data, and I'll come back to that. But then when we look at what are we going to change? So at the start, people were talking about AI will take out a lot of cost. AI costs to take out that cost, right? So then you're saying, okay, it can start to automate away things that can increase productivity, can increase capacity throughput, put more barrels through that pipe, add more electrons into your grid, and increase safety and so on and so forth. So you have to start going back to the basics, understanding your business processes, your workflows. I showed up many, many years ago when I had black hair on the first day on a site where I was given my 3 weeks induction into an asset. And I remember getting buddy system. I'm sure many of you are familiar with this, where you get assigned to a senior technician or a senior operator, and they took that folder, my standard operating procedure, which I thought was the Bible, and I was going to follow every single line in that SOP, and I said, nah. Let me show you how this work is really, really done, right? And I don't think I ever, in the 3 years I was on that first asset, I ever went back to that folder and looked at it. We just knew how the work was performed, but we don't document how that work is performed. So that's where we have to start. Once we're on top of that data platform, I'll come back and talk about that. So if you're a maintenance engineer, okay, you might have detected an anomaly. And that anomaly could be an agent. It could be a third party. This is the composable element that Menno was also pointing to. That anomaly gets surfaced up. Someone goes, okay, I have to scope this out. So let's go to that platform where my data is available, where I can pull up some historical information, work orders, etc. I can start to scope out. Again, that could be an agent. Right now, it's manually done. I start to scope it out. I maybe assign a work order, put it back into SAP, and then you start to plan it, schedule some intervention there, and then you go into the field and you execute on that. And that could be everything from changing out a piece. It could be doing some inspection around corrosion. This can manifest into physical AI. It could be a robot that's sent out there. That's also something we've seen. There's some specific use cases where this is very valuable. Or it could be the more traditional way, where you send someone out there to actually just look at it or perform the job itself, because robots just aren't able to do that yet. How do we keep all of that connected? And why should we keep it all connected? Well, first and foremost, you need a stack that can orchestrate this, multiple types of technology, composable technology. And why? It's because once you have that end-to-end, once you have had those traces of interacting with a system, once you've had the human decisions and the human decisions that weren't taken also tracked, you start to build a view of how that job is really, really done. And I just mentioned this here at the end. And when we go out and we talk about this and we implement this, a lot of people are talking about what's the value of this. And the question I ask quite many people, which has been asked to me, is, do you use Excel? And I think everyone will agree Excel is the workhorse of every organization. Great. If we were to take Excel away from you, how would that impact you? Oh, no, you can't do that. What's the value of Excel to you? I don't know. So having a technology platform that does this It's more a measure of impact right now and less about that hard ROI. Hard ROI will come. It will come once this is up and running, per what the panel was talking about here. Good questions about cross-functional teams. Really, really important that the future of this industry is set by the future people who will work in this industry. You need to have young people inside here because they think differently. They genuinely do. And I like to kill this term, they're fearless. They're fearless because they don't understand. Right? I remember when I was on an asset and a colleague was killed. Right? Very, very tragic. This was back in Ireland. And they went in to do some maintenance work, and it wasn't put on the docket that there was hot work being performed. And that person was killed because they didn't have the experience. I tell you, that was a very sobering day for everyone that worked in that asset. So you can be fearless until someone gets hurt or until someone gets killed. And let's be real, this still happens every single day in our assets. That's where experience comes in. They're the guardrails. You don't want to limit the flexibility, but you want to be able to say, hey, you want to over-optimize here? Well, you're going way past anything that I feel comfortable with, or safety. To be fair, we over-engineer safety into our systems as well. So there's a lot of, I would say, room in that envelope to push and expand inside that envelope. That's where we have young people pushing, and then you set those hard limits with the experience. That's super important. Okay. Starting with those workflows, today we have, I would say, across many organizations and ones that we're working with, you have human workflows, you have agent workflows. More and more we're seeing that. How do they converge? Back to the previous slide, you can have components being run, but you need to pull them together. You need to have a tool that can help manage both agents and humans in a good way. Once you start moving into, let's say, the midterm, this is where you start to optimize some closed loop elements. Okay, now I feel safe writing back. APC is a very good example of that, advanced process control. Initially, that was being very simple P&ID control, then advanced process control, simulated control, AI control, right? And it's machine learning in many cases when it comes to control systems. But prescribed outputs, non-deterministic outputs, also are something that we're going to be using from an optimization point of view. And finally, will be self-optimizing. But self-optimizing where it makes sense. And where do we draw the lines around that? So what we're looking at here, to move to human on the loop, or humans managing by exception, you need to have this divided between two very different decision-making, but connected decision-making tracks. On one side, you have something where it's very statistically accurate. I'm not talking about it being deterministic, but that it happens enough time that when you prescribe, you feel comfortable with it. This could be, think about alarms. Today we have humans acknowledging alarms in central control rooms, ignoring alarms. Why are they ignoring? That's been beeping since 2011. Nothing has happened, so we just ignore it, right? So there's things like this where you can actually have statistically determined outcomes, even though it's probabilistic elements to it, right? Then where you have to see, where do I draw the line on a human? So you can manage by exception. So we've some a very interesting customer where, and this was a lignocellulose customer, where they had one team per reactor, monitoring those reactors. It was 17 of them, 17 teams. Now they have one team monitoring 17 reactors. And they were only able to do that because they were able to automate quite a bit of this, and then they were also able to retrain those teams with the right mix of people. It wasn't the same composition makeup of the one team that was running one reactor, a very different. Bigger team, not 17 times the team before, bigger team, but a very interesting mix there, and people who were very native around digitalization, let's call it. When it comes to the decisions that humans absolutely should remain in the loop, ethical decisions, as I said, decisions where there hasn't been a lot of patterns from before, these can be safety elements, and contextual decisions. As I said, that discussion that you have on a factory floor at 3 a.m. to fix a problem, that's not written down anywhere. That will not be able to be put into the left-hand box over here. That's a decision-making matrix that has to remain in the humans until there is enough data collected, until it's documented enough, until it's trained into these models enough that it can maybe go over onto the left side. But this will allow us to move into a human on-the-loop scale. We're testing this inside our company. I'm not talking about for the industry. I'm testing inside my own organization. Where have we had people every single point making approvals? And this is removing bureaucracy in my organization. And how can we move more and more from the right to the left so that we have people actually truly taking their knowledge and experience, using it for really valuable time, or taking time off. This is a metric we're measuring this year. It's not an ROI on the use of AI, it is what's the impact, what's the level of adoption, what's the depth of adoption. Because even in an industrial software house like us, we have skeptics using this technology. And then we try to put a fun one in there. How much time are you saving so you can take that time off? I want people to be enthusiastic about this. Were you able to get all your tasks done for the week by Thursday? Great, take Friday off. That's great. So we're trying to make sure that people understand it's making their jobs better, not just asking for them to do more on steroids. Prerequisite, you need a platform. You don't put intelligence on top of chaos. You need to build that knowledge graph of your organization. You need to have all your data available, still inside their source systems, because there's a lot of regulation around those, but having it available to those people when they need it, when they need it and where they need it. That is super important. And then you need to have that workflow orchestrator on top of this that can orchestrate across those data sets and being able to pull in all of those composable elements into a meaningful way. So this is an absolute prerequisite. What we're also seeing more and more is how we have these AI harnesses, they're called. So on top, you're catching AI skills. That's the knowledge you have encoded into a prompt, repeatable skill. Secondly is AI harnesses. What are the safety guardrails? That can be a process. But going back to what we have been delivering in this industry for decades, simulation, physics-based modeling. We trust this. This can be set up as a guardrail if it can be scaled at a level that makes sense, because these are computationally very heavy, very slow traditionally. You normally have an expert team of people using them, testing scenarios, etc. How do we federate that? With a very, very good guardrail. NVIDIA more and more moving towards that tech stack, simulation or physics-based AI harnesses. Fundamental. There is risk, and there should be. We should be aware of that risk. But there's so much opportunity with this, a huge amount of opportunity. And we have to acknowledge that. If we can get the right standards in place, and I think to this gentleman's comment here, get the right standards in place, the right trust in place, we can scale this incredibly, incredibly fast and get a lot of value from this in the near term. And this is just a report from last year by PwC, so it's already out of date. So 3x higher growth in revenue. You see it less and less talking about cost efficiency, because if you look at companies like Anthropic who are saying we're fully automating or fully writing all our code using Claude, they're hiring more than ever. So I'm becoming less and less concerned about jobs just disappearing. Certain tasks will disappear, certain jobs will change, but we're going to need more people in different areas because productivity is going to go up, and safety. So that's something I think we need to be very enthusiastic about, but support it in a pragmatic way. Thank you so much.